deal. We're gonna. I loved looking through this lesson. I told Jonathan and I got to go to lunch today. I was like, man, did you see how many Psalms we were supposed to get through tonight? And, I mean, are you kidding me? But we're basically just going to run through David's life and kind of see what he was doing when he actually wrote some of these Psalms. And so puts a lot of context to these Psalms. Obviously puts a lot of feeling to them and knowing what he was going through. We're not going to get through all of them. In fact, I weeded out almost all of them. So we're going to do about 5 of them. And we'll really mostly focus on David's life and what he was going through. You think about David, and what are some things you think about David, characteristics of David? What are some things that pop out to you when you think of David? Okay, yeah, he was a flawed man, no doubt about it. Anything else? A lot of courage, yeah. I mean, anybody that can fight a bear and a lion as a shepherd boy, and then a giant, obviously had a lot of courage. Anything else?
The patience he had with Saul.
Yeah.
I mean, really, he showed a lot of patience during the period of time Saul tried to kill him.
Yeah. So, we were quick to point out his flaws. Obviously those come up over and over again, but he did have a lot of patience with the Lord's anointed. Mainly, it kind of goes back to his dedication to the Lord.
Because David said this, Saul was the king.
Right.
He was the king, God's anointed.
Yeah.
And he just could not bring himself, even when he cut the tip of his garment off, when he was relieving himself in the cave.
Yeah.
David had the opportunity to kill him at that point.
Yeah.
But he had that much respect for God, and because of God, he respected Saul.
Yeah. And Terrell hits the nail on the head, and that to me is David's main greatest attribute and the theme of his life is his respect for God, his love for God, and as Jonathan mentioned, his relationship with God. This was an ongoing relationship. And it's an interesting character study that we get from David. I can't think of many other characters you get from boyhood to death and their ongoing struggles and efforts to be right with God and then to fail and to come back and over again. And so, all of those things are great examples of what we think about when we think of David. Go ahead, Benny.
And one more thing that stands out to me about David was that he was his own worst enemy, like us.
Yeah. A lot of mistakes that he made ended up putting him in bad situations where he, was punished or got into situations that he wouldn't want to have been. So, a good example for us, to read and hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls that he ran into. This is a little bit trivial, but I think of this. There's a Tim McGraw song, and he's talking about his little girl and the kind of man he wants his little girl to marry. And he says, I want him to be a man's man and have a poet's soul. And I thought, well, that's David. He's a man's man and he has a poet's soul. And, that's a pretty good, interesting combination that you don't get often. And so we'll jump right in. I started, basically what I did is I went through, if you went through these Psalms, you kind of go through them and then you had to put them back in order, and I put them kind of in chronological order of his life. And where we'll start is in 1 Samuel chapter 21. Maybe. I have a PowerPoint. I don't know. Clicker's not working. Shouldn't have had a PowerPoint. Okay. Yep, okay. So, 1 Samuel 21, David here is, he's on the run from Saul. Saul hates him. He's, at this point, I think he's already tried to kill him several times. Karen and I this is not funny. We get a little bit of a giggle out of it when when Saul's there playing his harp in the corner, and David's playing the harp in the corner, and Saul just can't handle it anymore and just like chucks his spear at him. And we always think about David, jumping out of the way. So at that point, something like that's already happened. He's on the run. He came to the city or the town of Nob, and he comes up to the priest there, Ahimelech, and he says, I'm hungry. I need something to eat, something to refresh me. And so what's Ahimelech offer him? He offers him the consecrated bread from the temple, and David takes it. And so he's refreshed by this, and then he, let's see, I want to make sure I get everything in the right order because there's a lot going on in this chapter. There is a king that he is looking to escape to, and the reason why he went to Nob, and it's Achish, the king of Gath. And he comes up to, or Achish recognizes him, and what does Achish think of David? Does he have a reputation at this point? Yeah. And so, David, he acts insane. And so, because he doesn't want to be imprisoned by this king. And so he goes out of his way to act insane. And so that's just a little snapshot of what's going on in 1 Samuel 21. And the psalm that goes along with that is Psalm 56. And so I don't know, and you guys can correct me, someone can correct me. I don't know exactly when David wrote these psalms. With all of this going on, I guess I think about him having time or taking time to write these psalms down. Kind of setting aside, he's got a little journal or something like that that he writes these with. But does anyone know if are there timing on this, or would we know if he kind of was looking back at this? Do you know, Jonathan?
I'm not sure. There's really a way to know, but you can kind of assume that it comes with later thought because of the poetry of it.
Yeah.
People normally don't think in poetic verse.
Yeah.
Much like the book of Job.
Yeah.
I think those conversations would have happened, but probably not in the poetic verse that we read them in.
Yeah.
And so you have that inspiration aspect of it that turns it into, you see the parallelism, not poetic as we think of it in rhyming, but the parallelism and all of that kind of stuff seems to come with thought further down the road.
Yeah, there are a lot of literary mechanisms that, he probably was a smart guy, but, to be able to just spit that out at a moment's notice probably doesn't seem realistic.
I think Jonathan is probably on track there. He could have been reflecting much later and decided to express in a poem the things that he was thinking and feeling at the time.
Right.
As a way of praising God and expressing himself to God, and that's certainly sensible. There's another possibility, and it really neither here nor there, but it is an interesting question, and that is we probably ought to look at this like we watch a TV show. It's a compressed time.
Yeah.
You watch a TV show that's about somebody's life, and their life doesn't happen in 30 minutes. Bam, 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 bam.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of things in between.
Yeah.
Where they have ordinary lives. They go home and mow their yard. They go to the beach. They come back.
Yeah.
And so there's that possibility. It reads to us, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. And yeah, where in there would you sit down and write poetry like this? Well, it's possible that this is a condensation to tell us what happened, but doesn't tell us everything that happened every hour of every day.
Yeah.
This could have happened over a period of weeks.
Right. Yeah, we're reading a story for sure.
He could have had time and reflection, and when he's in distress, all right, I'm fixing to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So he may have had a few days to think about this and express himself to God, because
Yeah.
the deal that's at hand.
Yeah.
Either way.
I mean, it's conjecture. It's nice to think about. I like to think of him doing it, in real time, and being inspired, and because at these times, these are real emotions that he's feeling. For him to be able to pour this out in a poem would be, I think, cathartic for him, and like you said, actual pleas. Tony?
I think he really had more time than
Mm-hmm.
because even in her own life, Facebook down, put the TV down, all those things. There is a lot of time in your day that you burn incredibly with no productivity whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that he had a lot of time to set a fire, or he had time in the morning,
Yeah.
or it's amazing how much time.
Yeah, and he was kind of in hiding a lot, so he probably had to be alone or quiet.
We come across someone that he wrote probably was in the cave of Adullam.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we think, okay, he went into the cave, he saw Saul, and this happened. It all happened in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But he could have been in that cave for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Tony said, you combine David's natural passion. He was a passionate man.
mm-hmm.
He did have the soul of a poet, and then he had the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. So he had a lot going for him that nobody else has.
Yeah. I think about, they talk to soldiers, and they describe, being at war being like 75% boredom, 25% sheer terror. That's probably what his life was like at this point. And then not only that, I think, I've been reading through some of the Gospels, and you get to like Mary's Magnificat, and you're like, who talks like that all of a sudden? Where did that come from? Or Zechariah, after after John's born, he spits out that poem, and you're like, well, who does that? But
Moses, we have the Song of Moses.
yeah, and it's just kind of this beautiful, well-written verses that come from. So it's not impossible to think about. Certainly with our God, anything's possible. But we'll read just a few verses of this. So just to remind us, he's on the run from Saul. He's with Ahimelech. He's hungry. Ahimelech gives him the consecrated bread. Turn to Psalm 56, and we'll read just a few verses of that. Be merciful to me, my God, for my enemies are in hot pursuit. All day long they press their attack. My adversaries pursue me all day long. In their pride, many are attacking me. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you, in God, whose word I praise. In God I trust and am not afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? That's amazing. That's got to be encouraging to him to remind himself of that. Because he's exactly right. These are just mere mortals that are after him. Certainly they can harm him. They can kill him. But if God's on his side, he reminds himself that that's what's important. We'll go on to our second psalm, and it's in the same chapter. I kind of already mentioned it. When after he eats the bread, he's trying to find sanctuary with Achish, but Achish says, "Isn't this the guy that they said killed tens of thousands? I think we need to watch out for him. Like, we probably need to," it doesn't say this, but they're probably thinking, we need to put him in chains. He probably needs some guards around him. And so, how does David feign insanity? You remember the description? He drools, yeah. Says he has drool running down his beard. So he puts on a pretty good acting show here.
Remember, he also was carrying Goliath's sword while
Yeah.
he was doing this.
Yeah, so that is an interesting tidbit because I think, Achish shows up and he goes up to Ahimelech and he says, "Hey, do you have any weapons?" And Ahimelech says, "Well, all I've got is this giant sword from Goliath." And he's like, "That's perfect, give it to me." So it's just kind of an interesting aside there that you think about. David's like, "Oh, great, I'm glad I killed that guy," and that's still there. So just an aside and kind of pulling full circle some of the stories of David. But yeah, I mean, he puts on a full show. we can all think of people acting silly and trying to act insane. And it's weird, a little weird to think about David doing that. He was a man of great courage, but he also wasn't an idiot. And so he probably knew that he was outnumbered at that point. And I don't know, it's one of those things where, was it a little bit dishonest? Yeah, maybe. Was it something he might have gotten out of without being that way? Yeah, maybe. But it's certainly a really human element of the story, for sure. Any takes on that, or any comments on that? Him acting insane?
Might have been a good story later when he was around the fire with the other guys.
Yeah. Yeah, he was like,
Also scratching at the doors.
yeah,
So just the scene is just hilarious. To
Yeah.
be honest.
yeah,
The way he gets out of this.
yeah. He puts on a full display for sure. So we'll read a few verses of Psalm 34. Again, he's confronted with Achish, the king of Gath. Psalm 34, verse 1. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him, and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers him. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. O fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. Real quick, Karen asked me this. What do you think it means, taste and see that the Lord is good? Try it. That's a good explanation.
Like when we ask people about church, well, come and check it out.
Yeah.
You've heard this, you've heard that about Church of Christ. Well, come check it out, try it, see what you think.
Yeah. And it may...
Try God, you'll find out how good he is.
Yeah, it may be an actual tangible thing that you can, you can put your finger on. Taste and see that the Lord is good. I can't think of anything. David certainly had his needs met. Just before this, he actually needed something to eat, and so he was provided something to eat. And so he sees God blessing him, and this is a little bit of a trigger word for some of us, but providing him favor. Some of us, some might get a little turned off by some of our other Christian friends saying, man, that's some favor with that parking spot right there. Some people I've heard some people say stuff like that. It seems kind of trivial. But at the same time, we don't want to discount any blessings that we get and good things that we get from God as being favor. God, this is a little bit more extreme. David's life was at stake. And so he has no problem, seeing that. He might have even seen him acting insane and getting out of the clutches of a king as God providing for him. David kind of made that decision himself, but it worked. So he might have seen that as God, helping him out. I want to keep reading a little bit from this. It says, verse 10, the young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. What man is there who desires life and loves many days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil. Keep your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears toward their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the memory of them from earth. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. Interesting to think about him and all his flaws and the times when he wasn't righteous, probably preaching to himself, just like we talk about when we get up here and make a Wednesday night talk or get a chance to preach or something like that. Oftentimes the lessons, we get more from it ourselves when preparing from it than we do talking to somebody about it. So I'm sure David feels that as well. We'll go on to the next scene. Yeah.
Before we get to the next song, I should have put a note at the top of this lesson when I wrote it, that we get these connections to David's life in these songs from the headings.
Okay.
But when you get inside the psalm, there are no specific notes. Like he doesn't say in here, he doesn't call out anguish. He doesn't talk about the drool going down his beard. And we've emphasized this earlier in the quarter, that one of the reasons for that is because it makes these psalms much more applicable. This is not just David's psalm here. This is a psalm that we can all pray.
Yeah.
And so it's neat to, as we're doing in this class, this lesson, make these connections, see David's life going on, gives us maybe a little extra insight into the Psalms. But one of the reasons they are as general as they are is so that we can apply them to ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, and I wonder how much of that is, from the Holy Spirit, the inspiration. We think about, the good thing about David too is that we've talked about with the imprecatory Psalms is that it's not specific for him. He's not like, God, give me an axe so I can, cut off Achish's head, or, provide me with superior technology so I can beat the Philistines. It's not that specific at all. It is very general, but they are very personal too. We talked about in the imprecatory Psalms some of the ones that had attacked the whole nation of Israel, and how some of the imprecatory Psalms had said, defend the whole nation, how they had been, either violated or mistreated or put down as a people. And so it is interesting to think about, these very personal Psalms when we're fighting personal battles and how we can apply them personally. And then some of them that we get into that are more about the whole nation and how we can apply that maybe to Christians or our church or even our congregation if that is happens to be under attack. So that's a good point, Jonathan. I appreciate bringing that up. We'll go on to 1 Samuel 22, just the next chapter over. And pretty much just a continuation of this story. 1 Samuel 21 and 22 are packed with a lot of things. This guy, Doeg the Edomite, shows up. Who's his loyalty to? Jonathan says himself. Yeah. Saul. Probably because Saul was in power. You're probably right. Looking out for number one. So what he does is he says, hey, Saul, guess what I found out? Guess who helped David? And he sells out Ahimelech and says he provided him with food, and he provided him with a weapon. And what's Saul's reaction to that? It's pretty extreme. Certainly shows an element of Saul's character that we don't like. He says that Ahimelech has to be killed. And he calls on his warriors to kill Ahimelech, not only just Ahimelech, but all the priests that are in Nob. And what do Saul's warriors say to him? He said, go kill him. What's their response? No. They say no. And so even they are like, listen, we'll do some things for you, but we're not going to kill these priests. And so Doeg's like, well, I'll do it. And so he kills, I don't know the number. I think it does say the number, but 85 priests he kills at Saul's command.
You have to wonder what the other 84 were doing while he was killing one.
Yeah. In this picture, they're just lining up. But
I mean, I'd have time to go run and get me a sword before he got to me if I'm number 85.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
It was what it was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they were outnumbered, but yeah.
Okay, so I got the impression if Doeg go out by himself and slaughters 85.
Yeah. I don't know if they were lined up like in this picture, if he was going out and finding them. But nonetheless, a terrible scene of slaughter. We can think of, I watched a Western the other day where a guy was after another guy, and he made the same decree. Any town that helps this guy, if I find out, that's it for that town.
It was actually more than just the priest. Verse 19 says, "And not the city of the priest he put to the sword, both man and woman, child and infant, ox, donkey, and sheep he put to the sword."
Yeah, he wiped him completely out. And so the point of something like that is to send a message. And that's what the Western I was watching was doing too, because they want them to know that any town that harbors this guy or helps this guy is going to be punished. And to them, that is a way of smoking them out, smoking the rat out. So it's just, we look at it and it's just disgusting, and it is. But you can certainly tell why David would be afraid at this time. If he's willing to kill all of these innocent priests, what would he do to David if he got a hold of him? So Psalm 52 is what aligns with that. It's a short psalm, so we'll read all of that. And if you think about Doeg, especially in this beginning, you'll really see he doesn't say the name like Jonathan said, but it's pretty specific. Why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? The steadfast love of God endures all the day. Your tongue plots destruction like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You love evil more than good, and lying more than speaking what is right. You love all words that devour, O deceitful tongue. But God will break you down forever. He will snatch and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous shall see and fear, and shall laugh at him, saying, See the man who would not make God his refuge, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and sought refuge in his own destruction. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. I will thank you forever because you have done it. I will wait for your name, for it is good in the presence of the godly. I can't help but think about what great faith David had at this time. I know he, had seen awesome things that God had done. Just him killing the giant with that faith. Obvious that, God was able to do great things. But to have that go on around you, where these innocents are slaughtered, wouldn't that knock most people's faith in God? Wouldn't that? It would take a hit to mine. And you think about, where at times, even in present day America, where we might feel like, the nation's going down the toilet, soon we're going to be persecuted, and, we feel like outliers, and things are going on around us that, we know God wouldn't approve of, and, even that little stuff can shake our faith. But nothing like this is going on, where people of faith are being murdered and killed. And for David to be able to compose a psalm where he says, you just wait. God's going to have justice. And these people that are doing evil, I know that God is going to bring them to their end. He's not shaken at all. And so that's a great example for us as we go through our daily lives as 21st century Americans, thinking about, the morals of the country and things like that. It's nothing compared to what David was going through, but certainly a source of encouragement for us to think, you just wait. Obviously want to pray for them to turn around. But for those that don't and those that mock God, God's going to put them in their place. What are you laughing at, Tony?
It's another psalm.
Yeah.
Here, and I think when you see the background of 1 Samuel 22, those who maybe have a little bit of trouble with the preparatory psalms, I think this reads a little bit easier.
Yeah.
When you see what this man has done,
Yeah.
the severity It's not someone who's made a mistake. It's not someone who's made a one-off sin.
Yeah.
This is despicable.
Yeah.
And so you see a little bit more, maybe a little bit more understanding of this type of psalm when you have that background in mind.
Yeah, I mean, and he could certainly be talking about Doeg here, but he could be talking about Saul. I mean, whose order did he carry out with this? And so, coming back again, thinking about, David recognizes that Saul is a piece of trash. He's not a good person. But on a personal, or in his life, he's not going to actually harm Saul. So again, kind of a good example for us to ask God for vengeance, and he's the one that we're going to leave it up to. So, good point, Jonathan. Any final thoughts on this scene and this psalm? All right. We'll go on to Psalm 32. This is, you probably know what scene we're going to next. 2 Samuel 11 through 12. This is David and Bathsheba. David's shining moment. This story is just disheartening when you go through it again. The main thing that sticks out is kind of the beginning when David sleeps with a woman that's not his own, but there's so much more that David does that you just, you got to put the little text talk, SMH, I'm shaking my head, as you're reading along here. So just to kind of summarize, in 2 Samuel 11, David sends Joab and his army out to battle the Ammonites in the springtime, and David stays behind. It's probably traditional for him to do that. And he's up hanging out in his balcony one night, and he sees a woman bathing. Does everyone, what do you think Bathsheba, where do you think she was bathing?
Rooftop.
On a rooftop. Okay. Jonathan and I were talking about it at lunch, and it doesn't say that. It says more that David was on a rooftop and could see her. And so you think of the creepy teenager with the binoculars. I don't know if Bathsheba is as guilty as we often make her out to be, because your first thought is, well, what? David's up there looking around, and then you're like, what's she doing on the roof naked? Like, you kind of give David a pass, but he could have been up a tree. Yeah, he's a peeping Tom, basically. So, but. Yeah, that's exactly what your thought is. Yeah, but she, if you read it closely, she could have actually been it could have been a window that he was looking into. He was on a rooftop. She may not have necessarily been. Just a little detail to kind of give Bathsheba a little bit of a pass, because not to victim blame, but we do we're like, what in the world? Why was she up on her roof bathing? So just an aside there, Jonathan and I were talking about. So he sees her. He's a man, so not to excuse his behavior, but he says, hey, that's a pretty lady. Go get her for me. He sleeps with her. Not to make this even worse, but Jonathan and I were talking. He essentially raped her. I mean, there's no. Bathsheba had no power whatsoever. Can you imagine her saying no? She probably did. She probably said, "This isn't a good idea." Whether she was a willing participant or not, we don't know. But we know at this time, he was the king, and we know that women in general didn't have much power. And so that makes it even more disgusting.
Well, not to mention that he knew, not just that she was married, but he knew her husband personally. He's one of the 30.
Yeah, he's one of the mighty men.
Yeah, and then also her, I think it's grandfather
just gets worse. Yeah. So he calls in Uriah, and he says, he probably knows that Bathsheba is going to get pregnant. He says, hey, Uriah, come on home. Go visit your wife. And he's hoping probably that he'll sleep with her, and then the baby will, be his, or he'll think it's his. And Uriah is just a picture of, there's nobody like Uriah. I mean, he's an exemplary person. He sleeps outside the door because he says, my men are out sleeping in the field. Who am I to go and enjoy my wife? And so David has him killed by being sent to the front lines. And not only sent to the front lines, but he instructs Joab to pull back, so that Uriah is killed. And not only that, they take a pretty big hit from that in their battle. If you remember, there's a messenger that goes to David and says, Joab says, hey, you be sure and tell him this is why I lost these guys. So-and-so got a millstone dropped down on him. That's why he died. And he said, but make sure you follow that up and you say, oh yeah, but Uriah died. Make sure you tell him that. And so it's not only just that he's sent to the front lines, but they're pulled back, they're put in a bad situation, others are killed. Then somebody confronts him about his sin. Nathan comes to him and tells him a parable about a lamb and someone that takes that lamb. David realizes that he's the one that has done that very thing. And at that point, we see his lament and his call, his prayer for forgiveness. And he is also given a punishment. What are his punishments for this sin?
Child die, and there will be strife in his family.
Yeah, the child will die and will be strife in his family. Strife in his family is an understatement. I mean, it is terrible. Someone would sleep with his wives in broad daylight. It's pronounced.
And Nathan says that these things have been done in private. What happens to you is going to be out in the open.
Yeah. So a good lesson for us that, yes, we can be forgiven. In fact, I think he says, your sins have already been forgiven, but you're still going to be punished for this. So, talking to our kids and stuff, I'm going to forgive you, but you're still going to have to suffer the consequences for this. So this is I don't know if it's a good story for children, but but it is a good lesson for all of us. So we'll read a couple verses and then try to finish up real quick. This is David asking for forgiveness. Blessed is the one whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord counts no iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. For when I kept silent, my bones wasted away, through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me, my strength was dried up as the heat of summer. I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not cover my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the iniquity of my sin. So he's being very open and honest here, and he is acknowledging the pain that he experienced when he, I guess, finally realized what he was doing was wrong. I can't imagine him not feeling the pain in his conscience all along the way when he was making these decisions. So real quick, I want to get to the last part. I know we have like 1 minute. But David and Absalom, this story is crazy too. And so 2 Samuel 15 through 17, real quick, Absalom is standing at the gates. He's campaigning for himself to be king. He intercepts all the people that are coming to David trying to bring their problems. And he said, hey, wouldn't it be better if I answered your problems? Not only that, he goes down to Hebron and announces himself king. David escapes with his entourage to the wilderness, sends back a spy to Absalom's camp, a spy named Hushai. He runs into a guy named Ziba. This is a little bit of an interesting aside. Who's Ziba? He's a servant of Mephibosheth, and you guys can correct me. I had a little bit of time putting this together, but Mephibosheth, actually it said, so Ziba does David a favor, and he is rewarded. David takes all of Mephibosheth's inheritance and gives it to Ziba, but he says he's going to take all the stuff from Mephibosheth's grandson. So I don't. Maybe Mephibosheth is dead at this point.
No, Ziba lies about Mephibosheth.
Okay.
And then later, when David comes back in, Mephibosheth meets him and says, "No, I'm innocent," and all these things.
Okay. Well, that's the rest of the story. And then this scene right here that you're seeing is Shimei, a guy that's loyal to Saul, taunting David as he's walking past with his camp. And we talked about this a little bit with another psalm, and how some people might have thought that David stole the kingdom. Well, this guy is a guy that the election was stolen. Not to hit a hot button issue here, but it was stolen, and so he's not letting it go. And he throws rocks at David, and David's response was, "Don't bother him. I deserve it." Almost. He's like, "Just let him do it." And then we know the end of the story. Absalom, sleeps with David's concubines at the behest of his advisor. And then Absalom attacks, and then he dies. And then Psalm 3 is what coordinates with this, and it is, "Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him." So if you read through Psalm 3, it's really short. You can really see where he's coming from if you think about this story of Absalom and what's going on. So I would encourage you to go through these Psalms and that are listed here and read the backstory too, because they, like I said, they put it into context for sure. So thank you guys.